Hey everybody, welcome to the official Do Good Better podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Kirby. And of course, this show is all about featuring small nonprofits doing great, big things. I have a great one for you today. With us on the show, Ashleyham, Mink, co-founders of Dear NICU Mama. Ashley and Martha, thanks for being on the official Do Good Better podcast today.
Thanks so much for having us.
It's a pleasure, and it's fun to be podcasting and also see your face.
Yes, I agree.
Yes.
This is way better. I feel like we can give better facial expressions and have way more enthusiasm doing it with face-to-face. And there's no way that we're not going to have an enthusiastic chat today, because I think what you do and what Dear NICU Mama does is so invaluable. And I'm so excited to showcase this to all of our listeners and our watchers today. So for a viewer audience who's looking through YouTube, or they're looking through their favorite way to listen to podcasts, and they stumble across this, they go, Dear NICU Mama, this sounds fantastic, but I have no idea what the hell they do. So let's figure that out. Ashley, what is Dear NICU Mama, and how'd you guys get started?
Yeah, so Dear NICU Mama is a nonprofit that, not to completely read off our mission statement, but we exist to connect the past and the present NICU mom. So to connect with our services does not mean that you have to only be in the NICU. We connect with moms in the NICU and out of the NICU. And we say often that the NICU journey doesn't end when you leave the NICU doors. In fact, a new NICU journey begins of healing and restoration and growth. And so really our mission is just to create a sisterhood. One of our mission statements is welcome to the sisterhood. And so really we offer, right now, especially during the times of COVID, we offer primarily online support, and we do that through our podcast, which is a storytelling platform, as well as interviewing a variety of maternal mental health specialists that specialize in maternal health and PTSD and NICU trauma. And then we have a private Facebook group, Instagram, and with recent COVID events, we've had our online virtual events. So really, it's just a way and a beautiful sisterhood to connect with each other and to realize that you're not alone.
Amazing. And Martha, how did you guys get together? What experiences that bonded
I love
you
this
together?
story.
Yeah.
Right?
So you may guess that we are both NICU mamas. I think it would be kind of weird if we just pulled it out of left field.
That would be an amazing story. No, but we're going to go with the obvious.
No. Yeah. So Ash and I are both NICU moms. I have had two NICU babes. I had James Pierre, born at 25 weeks in Los Angeles. He actually passed away. And then I have my daughter, Jacqueline, who was born almost 2 years ago exactly. And she was born at 29 weeks, 3 pounds, and had 47 days. I always subtract 40 from Ashley's stay, and that's how I know how long. So I was 47 days. She had a pretty uneventful stay, but after about 5 years of going in and out of the NICU and fertility treatments, multiple surgeries to be able to have kiddos, dealing with the death of my son, I was dealing with some pretty significant PTSD, grief, anxiety, and depression that were all wrapped up with my hormones and the trauma of having NICU stays and births that didn't align with what my hopes and dreams were. So because I moved from LA to Fargo, which is a story in itself, I really wanted to find people here that I could connect with. And I had seen this beautiful Instagram profile by Ashley for Flora Pine Home. And the reason I was following her was completely for different reasons. She was a photographer. She is a photographer, and she was shooting a friend's wedding. And she is very into green, sustainable living. So I was following her for that reason. And I saw she got pregnant. It was one of those things. And I think a lot of women identify this. If you deal with infertility or NICU, you say, well, look, another beautiful lady having a gorgeous pregnancy. I bet it'll go perfect. And a couple months later, she posted that she had delivered her son preterm, almost a very similar time. Was he 28?
28. Yep.
Yeah. So I reached out to her on Instagram, like the creeper that I am. And it took me almost a couple weeks to do it because I was so nervous, but I did. And I just said, let's just hang out. And sweet Ashley took time out of the hay of NICU to make time for me. And I think, Ashley, you can maybe share a little bit about what that was from your perspective.
Yeah. So kind of like Martha said, I needed connection with other moms. I think the image of pregnancy and birth and motherhood that can oftentimes be portrayed on social media is a very distant reality for a lot of NICU moms.
No,
And
I don't.
Yeah.
Everything you see on there is true.
And so when I was sitting in the NICU and I would go on social media and see these flawless births and these precious newborn experiences at home, it broke my heart. And I didn't personally have close friends in my life who had gone through the NICU experience. And so when Martha reached out to me, I didn't hesitate. I was like, yes, I don't care. I will leave right now to meet you at Starbucks. And we connected, and we say this often that NICU moms kind of skip the small talk and they go right to the deep stuff. And I remember that was exactly Martha and I's conversation. We just went real deep right away, and an instant best friend sisterhood was formed. And so we connected that day, and then we connected when I came home. And what I realized, and I don't know if we want to jump this far ahead, but what I realized was there wasn't a lot of services here in our area for NICU moms and for NICU families. And that's not on anybody else. I mean, there was a capacity. You know, we can't expect NICU nurses to also be support groups for NICU moms, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I asked Martha, I was like, can we start a nonprofit where we connect moms together? And do you want to be my co-host on a podcast? And she said,
this
yes.
was like the third time we've ever met in person. And I was like, yeah, let's do it.
Yep.
You've clearly proven then that you skip the small talk or small business dealings. You go right and just dive in deep.
Exactly.
So as part of your experience being in the NICU, and there are no resources, how is and to parents and moms that have births that don't involve the NICU, you always, you're in the birthing center and you see the hallway, but you don't really go in there unless you have some sort of connection to it. When you're discharged and when you finally get to go home, what's the process there? They just say, hey, good luck. We'll give you a high five and sort of a thumbs up, and here's a balloon and get the hell out of here? Or how does that work? And then because you saw such a gap, did you find immediately that there were people who would just like, yeah, we would have used this the minute, we even had the diagnosis?
Yeah.
Martha, I'll start with you.
Yeah. Basically what happens, and it's different for every NICU because sure. Different NICUs, whether they're private or public, hospitals have different, just different funding platforms and different resources available. Okay. Like for example, there's a wonderful member of our support group. She's from Miami, and the hospital she was at offered a free farmer's market, pedicures, haircuts, a bunch of supports that are designed so that parents can feel as comfortable and safe and taken care of as possible. Those things were not available at our hospitals, and not because they're not great hospitals, but they have the resources to give our children excellent medical care and nothing else. Right. So we may have met with a couple social workers here and there who would say things like, are you feeling depressed? Yeah, my child's on life support, so I'm feeling depressed. And then we do discharge, which normally is walking through a protocol that they have of going over feeding protocols, everything like that, going over SIDS, sleeps, all this stuff, actually throwing a lot of scary information at you. Like, oh, if your child gets RSV, they'll probably be hospitalized and they may die. So have fun, bye. It's very scary because you're walking from a very isolated, clean place, the only place that you've really known how to be a parent, into the outside world, which is filled with germs and scary people. It's a lot like Rapunzel in Tangled, So you just go into the world and you're just constantly living in a state of fear. Right. Not to mention that you have been living in fight or flight for 30 days, 150 days, almost a year, however long you were in there. Your nervous system is on hyperdrive and you're completely unaware of it. So when you leave, there's absolutely no way that you have the tools, unless you're like a therapist and are seeing someone regularly, to be able to develop coping skills on your own. So that's what it's like for a lot of women. And that's just the general thing. We're not even talking about women who are from lower socioeconomic status, from underserved populations, who may live in healthcare deserts, mental health care deserts, and have no access to those things, or don't even know how to begin. They don't even have the words to describe what they're feeling, right? So that's what it's looking like. And especially in our market, which is a lot of rural moms, indigenous moms who are flown in from areas, they literally go from this metropolitan area and then they go back home where there's even fewer supports, right? So that's what we're dealing with. I forgot the second part of your question because I was talking so much. I'm so sorry.
I know, that was such a good answer. I didn't even think I had that question either. And that's interesting. And I think part of the thing, not only are you having, sort of, premature or NICU birth, but you're also dealing with a really complex medical issues that as a standard alone is probably isolating to trying to make a connection with somebody who is, sort of doesn't understand, medically speaking. And now you're going into an isolation piece on top of that. And you mentioned kind of at the top of the show, not only in an isolation world, but now we're living in an isolated everything world because of COVID-19. So how does that work, where you are now being a support system for moms who now live with this sort of invisible fear of COVID-19 on top of being in a isolated NICU environment? How does that work, Ashley?
Yeah. So, if any of the listeners are familiar with PTSD, there's this term called a trigger. And a trigger can be as simple as smelling hand sanitizer because it reminds you of putting it on your hands every single day. When a NICU mom is in the NICU, you're hyper aware of germs. You're hyper aware of, environment and people and coughing and sneezing. And so typically in a non-pandemic year, you come home and yes, you come with those things, but in time, that fades or that slows ever slightly. And now we're living in like what feels very similar to the NICU, right? The protocols are very much the same. And kind of like what Martha said, many, especially mamas here in the Midwest, are discharged and you're taught about RSV, cold and flu. And for us in our cold climate is almost 6 months of the year. And so you're coming from, many of us have been in isolation since October, and now are adding on what typically is our time of emerging back into the real world. So typically spring comes around and we start to kind of feel more comfortable going on play dates or going out to the park or going to Starbucks with your baby or going to Costco. And now that option is kind of taken away from you. And so it's been really crucial that our services offer a lot of hope and offer a lot of light, and reiterating that message that even though we may not be able to sit across from each other, you are never, ever alone. And so I think that mission statement will always be our core mission statement, because especially in times like this, you feel very alone.
Yeah, I think what a wonderful mission statement to hold true to, especially during a pandemic where you can always refer back to that. Speaking of mission statements, I have a bone to pick with both of you.
Oh.
I am a dad, and I don't see dads involved. There's no Dear NICU Dad. As appropriate as a question as that is, I'm sure you hear it all the time. So why just Dear NICU Moms and not Dear NICU Dads or partners, or what is that? I feel left out. I want to be a part of your crew. You seem to be awesome. Why not me?
I'll happily answer that because I write the responses to the emails all the time. First of all, we just want to acknowledge the experience of dads, partners, family members in the NICU it's important that it needs to be highlighted. It needs to be addressed. Those people deserve to have access to mental health supports, peer supports. But the second thing I'd like to highlight is that our experience is as women, and that is also an isolated, specific type of experience, which is it's your body. Right? The things that are happening in your body happen to your child. So a lot of the things that we deal with are shame and the concept of this is my fault. What did I do wrong? My body failed me. Childbirth should be natural. Why couldn't I do it? Right? These are very personal. And the ideas of pumping, breastfeeding, talking about those things, recovery from C-section recovery or vaginal delivery, those things are very intimate. And we wanted to create a space that was specific for women to talk about it, especially if they haven't been able to talk about it with their partner. If it's not something that they're comfortable talking about, this is a starting point for them. And one of our favorite kind of books or resources is The Body Keeps the Score, which is by Bessel van der Kolk. He's got a crazy Austrian name and I can never pronounce it. Van der Kolk or Vessel van der. I tried. A
combination of both of those is probably right.
Yeah, I have the book on my bedside table. I could hold it up. But one of the formative things he says is that communal experience with someone who has shared what you have experienced can be a foundation, can be a building block to healing in terms of trauma. Because even if someone says that happened to me, it is immediately a fountain of healing. We've seen it all the time, right, Ashley? In our online events, in our in-person events, in our peer support group, someone is talking about seizures, or they're talking about G-tube, or they're talking about breathing struggles, and they're talking about all these things, and I see someone who has had a similar experience react with incredible emotion because they've never talked to someone who has gone through it before they felt alone, like it was them against the world. And that's why it's such a huge foundation for trauma healing. And that's where we fill in the place. We're not medical professionals. We're not mental health professionals. We're peer support professionals. And it is a piece to the puzzle that is integral. And actually a lot of large organizations, March of Dimes, National Perinatal Association, a lot of teaching hospitals are saying that peer support is not only a benefit, but it's a requirement of successful family unit healing after NICU.
Well, and more so, and the question is hilarious because I just know you get asked that a lot. But it's more so to kudos for sticking with your guns and your mission. I think a lot of organizations get mission creep because they see opportunities to help others, and they keep helping and helping and helping. And the more wide of an angle you take, less effective some of that is. So I admire that your stick-to-itiveness for who you serve is wonderful. We like to ask a lot of guests on our show, especially some of these nonprofits that are just sort of ramping up and being awesome. Everybody's got a big, hairy, audacious goal, and I'm sure you have one or two. So I will ask you, Ashley, as part of Dear NICU Mama, what is a large, big, hairy, audacious goal that you have for your nonprofit?
Oh man. Can I maybe edit this part out, but Martha, do you want to touch on the Mama Ambassador Program and I'll touch on the celebration photo shoot stuff?
This is okay. We can talk about this. I'm not editing that at all. This is that's called delegation.
We edit the heck out of our podcast. So this is perfect.
This is great. Yes. Both of you get to talk about one thing each.
Yes.
I love it. So like Marcia mentioned earlier, I am a photographer. And one of the experiences that I was really looking forward to being pregnant was having a maternity photo shoot. I planned it out with a photographer that I love. I started looking at outfits, very early on. I was planning this perfect shoot. And because my son was born at 28 weeks and maternity shoots typically happen closer to full term, I didn't get that experience. And I grieved that. And I know for some that may seem really small, but again, for many women, it's that celebration of life. It's this, look at me, I'm carrying life. And so being a photographer, I just started to think of a way that we could honor moms and, even if they didn't get the maternity shoot, how could we celebrate their story and their miracle? And so one of the core missions of what we do is what we call our celebration photo shoots. And those celebration photo shoots are really powerful because we bring in a group of moms with a wide variety of stories. Some had preemies, some had full-term babies with medically complex situations. And we come together and we have them in really beautiful styled outfits, which is just another way to do some self-care, kind of pamper them a little bit. And they feel beautiful, they feel special. And we just do a shoot to really just honor them to honor their story, to honor their birth, even if it was completely not what they ever expected. Their birth is beautiful, their child is miraculous, and them as a mom is miraculous. And so one of the big goals of that is we are a small team and with one photographer. And so, we would just love to travel the world and do photo shoots. And yet I know that there would be a really powerful way to do these photo shoots all over the place with a lot of different photographers. So we would love to develop a curriculum for our celebration photo shoots that would allow us to network with other photographers in different states that could love on these other moms. And so with COVID, that's kind of been put on pause, but that would be a really big goal and dream, is to see these celebration photo shoots happen multiple times throughout the year, and having a curriculum that photographers would take to know how to handle some very sensitive emotion. It's not uncommon that there's tears at these shoots because we're affirming the heck out of them. We're asking them, like, tell us about your warrior, and that alone is emotional. And so really coming up with a program that's really special and intimate, and really even has some trauma training of how to respond to triggers and things like that. So long story short, I would love to see our celebration photo shoot curriculum really developed and done all around the world.
I love it. Brilliant. Martha, you get to talk about your.
Yes. I think Ashley's really highlighted this kind of core growth point for us, which is scaling on a national level. I don't think we ever imagined that would really happen within a year, but because Ashley's such an incredible social media marketer, we just have a very wide audience. I mean, we're talking all 50 states. We have a support group that has almost 600 members in it. We have a good following on social media, which covers countries like New Zealand and Spain, that people are very active in. So we didn't anticipate any of that. We just thought we were going to be doing things locally for ourselves, right? So another part of that is trying to scale up a program that we were going to be planning for this coming year, which is Mama Ambassadors, which is a peer support program that happens in hospitals. The idea is that we train groups of veteran NICU mamas who would go through peer support education on PMADs, which are perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, trauma, that would be trained on emergency response, in crisis, we would train those women and then send them out to hospitals. So we would develop relationships with hospitals wherein we could have these on campus, so to speak, in person, peer-to-peer mentorship programs. And we actually had just started developing our pilot programs. We were going to start those at our local hospitals in town. But that was a week before the presidential address about shutting down travel. Everything changed within 2 weeks. It was upsetting and disheartening for us, but that is our long-term goal. And what we're kind of seeing is that it might need to be virtual to start with, and then we can then transition to in-person. And part of that will be growing our leadership team so that we can have point people who will become advocates and can interact and advertise at hospitals in their areas, and also building a model that is transferable and flexible enough to address the specific issues in those markets, right? Miami, Florida, Denver, Colorado, Fargo, North Dakota, very different markets, very different needs. So that's kind of what our biggest growth thing, I think, is that we'll need to accomplish, because it requires a lot of legal sussing out and developing the training with mental health professionals and getting our liability coverage set and stuff like that.
Ironically, I'm sure that being in a COVID-19 shutdown where you are forced to go online probably has had a larger reach of individuals who are just now looking to the internet to reach out to say, hey, what do we do? And you're going to be set for success when this thing, finally gets under control, and then you can finally do those in-person things too. So I think you're in a primo position. That's awesome. There are a lot of support groups for probably moms. There's probably some support groups who deal with individuals who are in NICU. What makes Dear NICU Mama different than other organizations? Ashley, I'll let you take this one.
Okay. Yeah, I think, so, when I mentioned I was on social media in the NICU, I had followed a variety of different NICU pages or high-risk pregnancy pages. And what I found a lot of times was there was this element of fear, and I didn't find a lot of hope. And when Martha, because you don't have to convince me that I'm afraid. You don't have to convince me that my situation is serious. I know that. What I need to know is that I'm going to get through this. What I need to know is that this isn't the end. And when Martha and I were dreaming up Dear NICU Mama, we were very intentional that everything that we post, we're not going to shy away from the hard stuff. We're going to talk about the trauma, but everything that we say has to have a message of hope at the end of it. Because moms right now, they don't need more fear. They don't need more fear. That's the last thing that we want to post about. What we want to post about is what you're going through is hard. What you're going through is traumatic, but you can do this. You are not alone. This is not the end. And so I'm really grateful that from the beginning, our message has been, we will offer hope.
That's awesome. Martha, what's a documented success story that you can tell about this? I mean, I know it's been a year, but there's got to be such a transformation with some, moms who are going from complete despair to that hope that Ashley just talked about. Is there a couple of documented successes that you can kind of speak to that sort of, if you're a mom who's sitting in a NICU and they stumbled upon this podcast and they're looking for, like, is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Is there?
Oh, absolutely. And this is what Ashley's saying too. Hope is different than constant positivity, right? It's
Yes.
finding community to be able to sit with you during the hard moments. And that is what we've seen. We had a maternal mental health event in the fall before. You guys remember 2019?
Remember that? That was great.
It was a really great time. We had a retreat basically for NICU moms to come in or out of the NICU, hear from maternal mental health professionals, to have fellowship with one another, to do a self-care craft, things like that. It was, 6 hours or so, and they could interact with each other. That event was transformative. And I don't think we even saw it because, we were really working on all the logistic things, but we had no idea that there were friendships that being formed there with women that are now lifelong. People who walked in strangers that day that are now best friends. And that's the beauty of it, right? We don't have to be that support for everybody, but we are a network of women who are there for each other. At the very beginning, I could also add, when we started the online support group, people would post, and I felt like we were often compelled to be the ones to respond and give support and write long comments and respond and reach out. But now it's like it runs itself. And we've set, I think I'm going to kudos ourselves because we've set an incredible tone on that page, which is you respond with, first of all, Mama, you're doing great. I know this is hard, but you're not alone. And we don't even have to instruct anybody. We don't even have a guideline thing posted, right? They just get that tone. I think that's another huge success too. We could pull it up right now, and there were 3 or 4 posts from yesterday or today alone where there's 28 comments deep of, I get this, let me reach out to you. Here's a resource that I have. This is this. So that element that we're building a network, one thing we always say is that the NICU is, I guess this is the sad thing too, it's not going away. There are new people entering this community every single day. And so there will never be market saturation, right? It will constantly be a need. We have women, we have a folder on our shared drive too, of women who write to us about their success stories. We've had several moms write and said, this saved my life. I was suicidal, right? I think that's really hard to hear because the number one cause of death for women within a year of childbirth is suicide. And that's not something we talk about, right? And so imagine the PTSD, the grief, the trauma on top of that, right? So the fact that women reach out to us and say, this saved my life is a dream come true for us. And that happened within 4 months of us starting, right? Ashley's crying and I'm crying.
I think
Ashley's crying. I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Well, and I think that's such a testament to what a need it was and what a gap you fill. And again, I compliment you on sticking to your guns and sticking to how this is who we serve. this is why we do this. And if ever you stray as a nonprofit, if you're listening here and you're saying, well, this is, this has very similar rings to what I am trying to accomplish, is stick to what got you that first moment of brilliance. Get back to that, and you're going to find your true north in a second, and will help you sort of navigate a lot of the decisions you make as a nonprofit. And I think that alone is something. If you ever get lost, you open that folder, and that's an entirely win. Ashley, if you can get, sort of through the tears, which is great. And by the way, and that's part of the enthusiasm that you can tell right out of the gate about why you believe in this so much. And so there's that's awesome. But we like to celebrate a lot, and we don't do it enough in the nonprofit world because we think it's bragging occasionally. And as a new nonprofit, you want to get your feet under you before you sort of like, look at us, look at how awesome we are. I don't believe that at all. I think donors and I think supporters and people who are involved in the organization want to see wins, whether it's big, small, and everything in between. So I would love for you, Ashley, to give me a win. What can we celebrate with you here on the official Do Good Better podcast? A win for Dear NICU Mama.
Oh man, I don't even know where to begin. If I had to pick one win, I think I would kind of piggyback off of what Martha said I'm just really proud of the community that we've created. I'm really proud of how we didn't know how to do this. It's not like, we had we came in it with our heart. We came in it with passion, and the moms that we connect with on a daily basis and the way that they interact with each other, I could have never dreamed that it would be so beautiful, so powerful, and so affirmative. And so I'm just really proud of the sisterhood of women that we've built together. And I whenever we talk about the moms that we serve and the women in our groups, I get very emotional because truly they are some of the most remarkable people in the world. And so I'm really proud of our sisterhood. Yeah. That's a win.
That's a massive win. And in addition to that, launching a podcast and having a closed group and having all these things back to back to back to back. You don't find that success very often. You find one of maybe four, randomly. And so celebrating a lot of the things that would have taken a lot of other groups years to accomplish and doing it right away, that's a win in my book. Martha, one of the things that I love about this podcast is we get to go show gratitude to others, because there is no way on God's green earth that we would be able to accomplish what we're accomplishing by ourselves and alone. So I love to give a section of the podcast where you get to go shout out a bunch of people that you really love and want to appreciate. So are there groups of people or individuals or businesses that you want to show appreciation to here on the official Do Good Better podcast?
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to say that probably one of the number one resources that we tap out is Prairie Land Counseling, Natalie Ryder in town.
Yes.
He is an incredible mental health provider and educator and business person. She runs her own practice. She has been for us since day one. She provides her services for us on, I'm not mental health services, but her speaking and materials for free. She just does it for free because she's amazing and she believes in us. She refers people to us constantly. She's an angel. We don't deserve her. She is a personal Oprah. She's wonderful. She's been on the podcast 100,000 times. And if we ask her to do something tomorrow, she'll do it. She's incredibly giving. I would also say there's been a couple of vendors in town that we worked with. A lot of our fundraising comes from merchandise sales right now. So Ashley has an incredible aesthetic eye. She's so good at design that she's made really well curated pieces with shirts from Fargo. And their model is pretty much they offer a good chunk of the profit from sales back to us. And then they take care of fulfillment and printing and all that stuff, which is amazing because we tried to do it by ourselves and it was really hard. Because I don't want to be a shirt fulfiller. I want to run this organization. So that has been great too. I think locally, we've really tried to find people that we can connect with so that we can just create a network of people. And also, I also say Natalie is constantly pushing us to use other groups in town, that can help us solve problems that already exist for us. I'd also like to give a shout out to ashleyham because, and I don't know if this is unorthodox or not, I find her to be like the president and I'm the vice president and, of this country that we run. But I think she's a visionary. And the other thing she's done, and we've all done really well as a team, is establish boundaries that are healthy. The subject matter that we deal with on a daily basis is incredibly triggering for us. We're not that far removed from our own experiences and our own trauma. So and I think Ashley has really done so well at setting this, this standard, is that we just step away from our phones. We step away from it when we need to. We have breaks. Nope, I can't do this event. I'm suffering right now. I need help. And we just say, okay, that's all right. We step up for each other and we protect each other. So I appreciate Ashley for that. So shout out to her.
I like it. Oh, this is, yeah. That's we usually don't have multiple guests on the show, so this is not out of the normal at all. So this is perfect. Speaking of appreciation for being a guest on the show, I like to show my gratitude by giving any fundraising advice that you need as an organization. So, is there a fundraising question that I can help you out with? I am here at your disposal. Whatever you need to know.
Martha, that's your wheelhouse.
Yes, I have 1,000 questions. We'll have to set up another meeting with you, Patrick, because I have a long list of things. But I think for us, one of the fundraising things we've just not tapped into is just grants. And we had started some grant applications last year, and then a lot of them just pressed pause because of COVID. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that was a blessing in disguise because we weren't ready. But I think a good question for us is, we're so small. Do we try and just attack it on our own? Do we contract out and find somebody? I think, and trying to find the right grant for us, too. I think the biggest area now is finding a grant that can help us scale appropriately. So I think it's finding, and then how do we execute it? Do we do it ourselves? Do we try to find somebody else to do it for us?
I would say yes, contract out a grant writer because they know what they're doing. And even those of us who are in the fundraising world that don't work on grants a lot find it confusing and wearing. So you've got enough to deal with to run the organization to keep that high level kind of thing. It's well worth to find a professional who does it. And in fact, your wheelhouse is probably connecting things and making sure that individuals have the opportunity to donate on a personal level, which, by the way, relying on grants only is a dangerous precedent you don't want to set either. So you want to build this multi-tiered ability to fund the organization, whether you get trapped in this, if we only get this grant, we can do all the things. That grant goes away, then now you have all these things without that resource. So you want to build a balance. And if you can get started with a grant, that's awesome, but you also want to at the same time build your individual donors, event revenue from sponsorships. You want to get them into a sort of a major donor play eventually down the road. So you want to do a balance with that. But to answer your question, because brevity is not my strong suit, is yes, hire it out because they know what they're doing. They will look for you. They'll do all the research for you, and they will let you know the requirements of when you do get the grant. The danger in some granting is that you can get into the we'll chase some dollars. So if something is out of your scope and scale, but the temptation is a bunch of zeros, you can get into a little mission creep and get away from what you're originally supposed to do. So be wary of those. There's a lot of opportunities for scale and growth on a lot of those things, but be careful of getting into one aspect of fundraising and get it involved into a multiples, and you're going to be well off there. Speaking of well off there, we've come to the end of our show, but I want to make sure that somebody who has a giant sack of money sitting right next to their computer listening to this podcast or watching it can give it to you. But if nobody knows how to get a hold of you, they can't give you this. So the floor is yours. Ashley, how on earth do we get a hold of Dear NICU Mama to give you a boatload of money, a boatload of support, to like you and follow you and all those things? Give me the details. The floor is yours. Okay.
Well, we have our website, which is just dearnicumama.com. And on our website, we have a donation page, which will link you directly to a place to donate. We also have our Patreon, which essentially funds our services like our podcast. And there's a link for that on our podcast page on our website. And if you just want to support us by following us and sharing our resources, we have our Facebook on social media, we have Facebook, Instagram, and then our podcast as well. And those can all be found under the handles of Dear NICU Mama.
I love it. As of always, we will have all of those links in the show notes as well. So when you're done with this, you see a sign off, go immediately and click and give all your money, because this is not only an amazingly worthy cause, but it's so unique and so well done and so true to what they have originally done. And I think that is a testament to the commitment that you've got to not only your NICU mamas, but everybody else involved who is benefited by your calming presence and sort of your community as well. Thank you, Ashley and Martha, for being a guest on the official Do Good Better podcast. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks.